Hi there, this is Dan Weiss, president of Datasol, and I'm here with Dustin, who was our developer on the QuickBooks functionality for FrameReady. Hi, Dustin.
Hi, Dan.
So today we're going to be talking about the QuickBooks functionality that we developed for FrameReady. Dustin, can you start us at the beginning and just talk a little bit about what we planned with the functionality? In other words, that it's mainly a push, correct?
Right. So we push the contacts, so your customers out of FrameReady, the invoice, and then any payments related to that invoice will all push from FrameReady to QuickBooks.
And what's involved before you get to that point in setting things up? Can we walk through that a little bit?
Sure. So all the settings are in a real easy to use file that we've included. And they're found under the Fiscal tab in the Setup Data in FrameReady. And here's the FrameReady QuickBooks Integration settings. So we have a way for you to authenticate with QuickBooks online and install any plugins related to if you're using desktop. But in order to use the integration, we have to pull down all the items that are in QuickBooks that you would be using in FrameReady, line item settings, any tax codes, and any payment details are all brought down into this integration file so that way you can use them in FrameReady and you'll be referencing your QuickBooks items.
And we have separate documentation that explains kind of that whole setup process, right, Dustin?
Yeah, we have a whole PDF that walks through setting this up, adding items, as you use the system throughout time. You can add new items in QuickBooks, and you can bring them down into FrameReady and show them in FrameReady on an invoice.
Great. So let's go into a customer, for example.
So I have a customer file here in FrameReady, and you'll notice that there's some new section down here at the bottom where it says Push to QuickBooks. It's under the Invoice Detail tab. And simply in order to push this, after the setup is all done, we simply just push the customer and then FrameReady will do its work. And then down at the bottom you'll see that we successfully pushed this customer because we get a QuickBooks ID back in FrameReady.
And if later that customer's information gets updated in FrameReady, what would happen? How would you, can you re-update it?
Yep, so once we have an association between this customer and your QuickBooks customer, we can quickly come up to any of the fields that are pushing to QuickBooks. We can change it, we push it again, and that information has now been updated in QuickBooks.
And the one that I noticed on the lower left-hand side means that it's like an iteration of that customer?
Yeah, so every time you push an update from FrameReady to QuickBooks, that number will increment to show that a change was made.
Got it. So can we see that in QuickBooks?
Sure. So we have QuickBooks, this is a sandbox test account, but one thing we'll notice is that this customer ID here up in the top corner of FrameReady, we can come in here and search by that same ID, and that person's account will come right up. We'll see that we have Mary Wilson's, which is the name that we changed it to, and they're in QuickBooks.
That's awesome. And then let's say we want to push one of Mary Wilson's invoices.
Yep, so we would go to the invoice, and so here's an invoice for Mary Wilson, and you'll notice down at the bottom we have a similar setup as the contacts where we have push to QuickBooks. One thing about the FrameReady QuickBooks integration is that each of your line items in FrameReady has to be associated with a QuickBooks item. So we have a little green check box here showing that this line item has been associated with a QuickBooks item for accounting purposes. And so once we have a green line item there, we just push that up and we'll get a similar response from QuickBooks showing that an invoice was added. And if we go over to QuickBooks and come back out here and refresh and go find her again, we will show now that we have an invoice that was pushed up for the same amount and associated with that contact. The other thing that we will notice is that since this invoice had a payment in FrameReady, That one push of the invoice also pushed up the associated payment.
Now, one thing I just want to notice here is you're on a Mac and you're on QuickBooks Online. On a Mac, this will only work with QuickBooks Online. But if you're using a PC with FrameReady, you can use both QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online. Both will work.
Correct.
Right. So similarly, if we update that invoice, so let's say we added another payment to clear the balance, how would we push that?
Yep, so a new payment would be added, and once again this association happens and is there, every time you push this, QuickBooks will be updated with the new information. It will not create a duplicate invoice, it will just update the invoice that was already pushed.
If anything gets updated on the QuickBooks side, however, it isn't going to get pushed back to FrameReady, right? That's important to understand. It's really a push to QuickBooks. And I think that's important. When users are using this feature, they're going to want to know that, FrameReady is the main source of the information, and you really don't want to update information in QuickBooks separately.
Correct, yeah. FrameReady should be the master, if you will, of the information for invoicing, and it's that one direction push from FrameReady to QuickBooks.
Right.
Yeah, so one thing I'll note too with the way this is set up, we just showed pushing a customer first and then pushing their invoices. The way the invoice script works, the push works, is that if the customer has never been sent to QuickBooks before, by just going to the invoice and pressing that push to QuickBooks on the invoice level, the integration will actually push the customer first behind the scenes and then push the invoice information. So it's a one push will do both the customer and the invoice all at the same time.
So the feature itself is a huge time savings, but that alone, if you think about it, makes it so that if you've got a new customer in and they place their order and they pay for it right there, you don't have to do two separate pushes. You can just wait till you do the invoice, if that does happen, and then do it all at once.
Correct.
That's pretty amazing. And it's all very fast. I noticed it takes only a couple seconds to push.
Yeah, the integration is, especially with online, is very quick. Desktop, it's more of a local connection, so it's just as fast.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks so much for this hard work, Dustin. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we look forward to getting this out to your customer.
Thanks.